Deep within the Vatican's sacred chambers, where only the highest members of the Catholic Church can enter, lies a secret kept for generations. It is not just a treasure, as many believe, but something much darker and more ancient. Golden relics, stacked and hidden, accumulated over the centuries, are guarded not for their material wealth, but because they carry a story that can shake the foundations of humanity. On a silent night, the wind seems to whisper through the corridors of the Vatican. Inside, among shadows and flickering candles, something is about to be revealed. An unknown historian discovers an ancient document sealed for centuries. The words written in Latin make his hands shake as he reads, "Gold not for God, but for those who return from the stars." And so, a disturbing question arises. Why does the Vatican, of all nations and institutions, own so much gold? And more importantly, who is this gold really saved for? This secret, until then suffocated under layers of faith and mystery, begins to emerge, bringing with it memories of a dark encounter, an encounter that was hidden from the world for a reason. Matteo Bianchi was not a man of faith, but his passion for history consumed him. His work as a researcher had taken him to the Vatican, where he hoped to find answers about the ancient papal dynasties. He never imagined he would stumble upon something so much more disturbing. In the Vatican's hidden archives, far from the public eye and the prying hands of ordinary scholars, Matteo came across a dusty document hidden behind forgotten volumes. At first it seemed like a routine letter, signed by a long-forgotten cardinal. However, as he glanced through the text, something caught his attention. It wasn't just any letter. It was an account, full of strange symbols and terrifying descriptions, given by someone who claimed to have witnessed a supernatural event within the sacred walls of the Vatican. The words on the ancient pages spoke of a night when the sky was torn apart and figures of light and darkness descended, bringing a message of destruction and power. What shocked him most was the mention that the gold stored in the Vatican was a bargaining chip. Matteo frowned. How could the Vatican treasury be linked to forces so beyond human understanding? Later, the document mentioned something even more sinister. They will return, and when they do, gold will be the only way to prevent our destruction. The date of the document gave him goosebumps. It was 1961, exactly 1 year before the death of Pope John XXIII. Matteo didn't know what to make of the discovery. The Vatican had its own way of silencing those who got too close to certain secrets. He was faced with something that threatened the official narrative that supported the power of the Church. And if the words in the document were true, the world was at risk. With his heart racing, Matteo decided not to tell anyone, yet. He needed more proof, but deep inside a voice told him that he already knew too much. The discovery was just the beginning. Something terrible was at stake, and the shadows of the Vatican were moving to cover it all up. The death of Pope John XXIII had always been shrouded in mystery. Officially, it was said that he succumbed to his poor health, but few knew the truth. In the last days of his life, the Pope had been haunted by something that not even his closest advisors could understand. And it was during a morning walk in the Vatican courtyards, under a sky that until then seemed clear, that everything changed forever. Giovanni Rossi, the Pope's personal guard, was with him on that fateful day. He watched as the sky began to darken in an unnatural way, as if the light itself was being drained. Within seconds, a deafening hum filled the air. Giovanni described the sound as something that penetrated the soul, generating indescribable terror. And then suddenly, a blinding light fell upon them. When the light disappeared, Giovanni, the Pope, and Loris Capovilla, his secretary, saw imposing figures before them. They were not human, they were giant beings covered in shiny scales with cold, predatory eyes. The leader of these beings, who Giovanni would later call Draconians, did not use words, but his voice resounded in the minds of those present. "We're back," he said. "And this time we will not be worshipped as gods. Now we demand what is ours." The Pope, shaking but remaining calm, asked what they wanted. The answer was direct. "The Vatican's gold belongs to us. You have 48 hours to hand it over or the earth will be destroyed." To prove that they were not bluffing, one of the Draconians pointed at a nearby guard and, with a simple gesture, disintegrated him before his eyes. Fear froze Giovanni. The Pope, with superhuman calm, returned inside the Vatican, where an emergency meeting was called. There was a choice to be made: hand over the gold or risk extinction. But deep down, everyone knew that this was just the first of many demands. The Draconians, as Giovanni had described them, were not just visitors from another world. They were conquerors. These reptilian beings had such an oppressive presence that their mere appearance left a sense of terror in the air. They were not gods, as they had been mistakenly worshipped in ancient civilizations, but a race of creatures with technology so advanced that it appeared magical to human eyes. The ultimatum given to Pope John XXIII was clear. The Vatican's gold must be delivered within 48 hours, or the Earth would suffer the consequences. Humanity, with all its history of wars and conflicts, was about to face a threat beyond any imagination. It was not just a question of the survival of the Vatican, but of the entire human race. The destruction the Draconians could bring was incalculable. With a weapon that disintegrated a guard in the blink of an eye, it was clear that they possessed power that humans could not match. However, their request seemed almost simple: gold. Why would such an advanced civilization demand something that humans valued only as currency? The Pope, in his wisdom, knew that gold was not just a shiny metal for these beings. The Draconians explained, in their telepathic and impassive way, that gold was vital to the functioning of their technology. They needed the metal to maintain their energy systems, and Earth, especially the Vatican, had one of the largest reserves in the world. The dilemma was colossal. Handing over the gold meant not only giving in to the demands of an alien force, but also betraying the trust of humanity and the Church. However, resisting could mean total destruction. And then an even darker question arose. If the Draconians demanded gold now, what more could they want in the future? Could this be just the beginning of a full-scale invasion? While the Pope pondered the decision, Giovanni Rossi's eyes remained fixed on the shadows, waiting for something, or someone, to bring a solution that he could not yet see. Within the Vatican's hallowed walls, the tension was palpable. The decision that Pope John XXIII and his advisors needed to make was not just about a simple gold tribute. It was a choice between submission or resistance. And as the hours passed, the division among the church members became more evident. The Vatican, so united in its faith, now faced one of the greatest dilemmas in its history. Should it give in to the demands of the Draconians or face potential destruction? Some of the more pragmatic cardinals saw handing over the gold as the only possible solution. For them, the preservation of humanity was above any spiritual issue. If we lose everything, what good will it do us to keep the gold? One of them argued. These cardinals believed that gold, although sacred and precious to the Church, could not be compared to the lives of billions of people around the world. It was a necessary sacrifice, even if it was painful. On the other hand, there was a more fervent faction, led by a deeply devout cardinal who saw the Draconians' ultimatum as a test of faith. For him, giving in to the demand was a betrayal of God, a surrender to the forces of evil. So if we give up the gold, we will be giving up our soul. Our faith is our only defense, he proclaimed loudly, attracting support from other religious people who shared the same vision. These men saw the situation as a divine test, which the Vatican must resist, even if it meant facing cataclysmic destruction. God will protect us, they stated, firm in their belief. Between these two factions, Pope John XXIII found himself in an impossible position. He understood the value of faith, but he also knew that the threat of the Draconians was not something that could be ignored with simple prayers. Giovanni Rossi, always present as a loyal guard, saw the tension growing. He knew that, whatever the decision, the future of humanity and the Church would change forever. Outside the meeting room, Giovanni listened to the murmurs and discussions that intensified. He could not participate, but he felt that the Vatican was on the verge of an internal rupture. Floris Capovilla, the Pope's secretary, whispered in his ear as he passed by, "We are heading towards something unimaginable." Giovanni silently just agreed, feeling the weight of the fate of the Church and the world approaching a point of no return. As the Vatican continued to be mired in internal debate and division, a disturbing truth began to form in the minds of those who understood the nature of the Draconians' request. Gold, venerated by the Church and humanity for centuries as a symbol of wealth and power, had a much deeper and more terrible meaning for the alien visitors. They were not interested in gold as currency or ornament. To them, the golden metal was an essential component of their advanced technology, something humans could not even begin to understand. The Draconians had revealed to Pope John XXIII, almost casually, that gold was essential for the maintenance of their energy and technological systems. They used metal to power their devices and ships, manipulating its properties in ways incomprehensible to human science. Explanations about the complex reactions and uses of gold in alien technology were transmitted telepathically, in a cold and calculated language, which made it clear that humanity's time was running out. There was no negotiation. Gold or destruction? This information reached a small circle of advisors close to the Pope, and the more they understood, the more it became clear that the Draconians were not the first to exploit this resource on Earth. There were records, suppressed and hidden in the Vatican's deepest archives, of ancient civilizations that had worshipped these same beings, mistaking their advanced technology for divine powers. In the time of the pharaohs, humans had unknowingly provided gold to the Draconians in exchange for a peace that lasted briefly before they were abandoned. Now the visitors returned, demanding the same tribute. But this time the Vatican was at the center of this transaction. Handing over the gold would mean allowing these beings to continue operating their superhuman technology, possibly to the detriment of the Earth itself. On the other hand, resisting meant exposing the planet to its immeasurable fury. Giovanni Rossi, always observant, absorbed this information with a growing sense of despair. He could feel that humanity was being played in a cosmic game that it barely understood. Gold, which for so long had been a symbol of earthly wealth, now revealed itself as the key to the survival or destruction of the human race. As internal debates within the Vatican reached an increasingly heated impasse, something extraordinary began to happen in the Roman Knights. The signs that Giovanni Rossi had already noticed days before the arrival of the Draconians were becoming more and more frequent. Strange lights began to streak across the sky, moving in ways that defied the laws of human physics. They were not stars, nor planes, nor satellites. For the few who paid attention, they were a harbinger of something much darker. These lights did not go unnoticed. Within weeks, rumors began to circulate on the streets of Vatican City. Night guards, monks, and even tourists have reported seeing these pulsating lights that disappear as quickly as they appear. The whisper that something supernatural was afoot spread silently through the Vatican's corridors, generating both fear and anticipation. For those who knew the truth, the few who had read the internal reports and witnessed recent events, the lights were a clear sign. The Draconians were preparing for something bigger. Those who did not believe the Pope's report began to reconsider their positions. Tensions between the cardinals increased as the pressure intensified. Giovanni, now burdened with the weight of truth that only he and few others knew, could not ignore what was before his eyes. Each night, he would climb one of the Vatican's towers and look up at the sky, always waiting for the next move of the Draconians. He knew that these lights were not just a visual spectacle, but a clear message. Time was running out. Loris Capovilla, the Pope's faithful secretary, in a confidential conversation with Giovanni, expressed his fear. "They are watching us, Giovanni. Every move we make, every decision we postpone, the lights. Her reminder that we don't have choice. Either we give in, or we face the consequences." The buzzing, oppressive silence that always accompanied these lights penetrated the souls of those who watched. The lights were there, night after night, as if patiently waiting for the decision to be made. And as the cardinals and the Pope struggled between faith and survival, the sky became increasingly charged with mystery. Giovanni knew that whatever humanity's fate was, it was sealed within the next few hours. With the lights in the sky becoming more frequent and the constant hum echoing deep within the Vatican, time was running out. The pressure on Pope John XXIII was overwhelming. He knew he needed to make a decision soon, as Draconians were not known for their patience. The meeting of cardinals, counselors, and experts was scheduled for the following morning, and it would be the moment when the final decision would have to be made. However, the environment was poisoned by suspicions, fears, and conflicting beliefs. During that last night before the crucial meeting, the atmosphere in the Vatican was thick, almost suffocating. Giovanni Rossi, faithful to the Pope, was called for a last private conversation with Loris Capovilla. There he heard what he already feared. The situation had become uncontrollable. Some of the cardinals who had previously supported the Pope now began to plot in the shadows. They were convinced that giving in to the Draconians' demands would be an unacceptable betrayal of the faith. These cardinals formed a secret resistance, willing to stop the delivery of the gold at any cost. Internal divisions were growing rapidly, and while the Pope was preparing to make the necessary sacrifice, these insurgents were planning an act of rebellion. The handover of the gold, which was scheduled to take place in the Vatican courtyard at sunrise, was about to become the scene of an explosive confrontation. Not just between the Church and the Draconians, but between the members of the Church themselves. The silence of the night was broken by feverish preparation. The Vatican coffers, full of gold, began to be transferred to the delivery location. Guards took position, Aware that they were dealing with forces far beyond human comprehension, Giovanni, watching everything closely, knew something was about to happen. There was an air of inevitability in the air, as if the fate of humanity was being decided in the next few moments. At dawn, when the first rays of sunlight crossed the horizon, the Vatican courtyard was ready for the most important exchange in its history. However, what no one expected was that at that exact moment, the resistance of the insurgent cardinals would make their move. When the Vatican's gold was carefully piled in the courtyard, the atmosphere of tension was so thick that it seemed to freeze the air. Pope John XXIII, with an expression of serene resignation, watched from a distance, surrounded by his closest advisors, while Giovanni Rossi, like an attentive observer, captured every detail of the scene. However, he knew something was wrong. The murmurs of the insurgent cardinals had reached his ears the night before, and now he awaited the moment when this secret resistance would reveal their plan. And then, just as the draconians began to materialize in the courtyard, their reptilian forms glowing in the morning light, chaos erupted. A group of insurgent cardinals, led by the fervent and impetuous Cardinal Bellini, entered the courtyard with surprising force. Armed only with the conviction of their unshakable faith, they accused the Pope of treason and cried out that handing over the gold was a pact with evil. "I cannot give our souls out of fear," roared Bellini, his eyes aflame with religious fervor. He believed that God was on their side, that faith could prevail over alien force. The draconians, imposing and imperturbable, watched the scene with terrifying coldness. To them, these humans were nothing more than insignificant obstacles in their plan. However, the audacity of the insurgents forced a response. The leader of the draconians stepped forward, his blank, icy gaze sweeping across the courtyard, and with a simple gesture of his scaly hand, he caused the ground to shake. Giovanni watched helplessly as some of the insurgents were thrown to the ground by an invisible force, a clear warning that they would not hesitate to use their devastating technology. The Pope, with a trembling voice, intervened, trying to calm the situation. He understood the insurgents' desperation, but knew that without the delivery of the gold, destruction would be imminent. "Stop! This is our only chance to save humanity!" he shouted. However, the Pope's words fell on deaf ears. The insurgents were filled with the fervor of their conviction. Fellini and his group were willing to do anything, even if it meant directly challenging the draconians. The draconian leader, observing the growing confusion, raised his gaze to the Pope, and with an enigmatic expression simply said, "You will get what you deserve." As chaos engulfed the courtyard, Pope John XXIII found himself faced with an impossible choice. The revolt of the insurgent cardinals threatened not only the integrity of the Church, but also the very survival of humanity. He knew that if the gold was not delivered, the consequences would be catastrophic. Yet seeing his own men, those who had sworn allegiance to God and the Church, rebelling against what they believed to be betrayal, tore at his soul. The draconians, impassive and distant, observed the scene with inhuman coldness. For them, this internal division was irrelevant. The gold was what mattered, and if it wasn't delivered, the planet would pay the price. The tension in the air was palpable. As the insurgents resisted, demanding that the gold be saved and faith prevail, the Pope knew time was running out. In a moment of tense silence, the Pope made a final decision. He took a step forward with a calm that contrasted with the tumult around him. Raising his hand, he ordered the gold to be handed over. The words were simple, but loaded with weight. "May the sacrifice be made, may our faith remain intact, but may humanity be spared." The order caused even the insurgents to hesitate, shocked by the determination in their eyes. The carefully stacked golden chests began to be moved towards the draconians. The shiny metal reflected the dawn light, seeming to gleam with a shine that suggested both hope and despair. The sight of all that gold being handed over to beings from another world was a devastating blow to the faith of many present there, who saw it as a symbol of surrender. For others, however, it was the only possible choice to avoid annihilation. As the gold was handed over, the draconian leader approached the Pope, watching him with his piercing, impassive eyes. "You did what was expected," he said telepathically, without moving his lips. "But remember, humans, what you gave us today will not buy your peace forever. We will return." And with that, in a flash of light, the draconians disappeared, taking with them the gold that could have meant the salvation or doom of humanity. The courtyard fell into a sepulchral silence, but no one there felt at peace. With the departure of the draconians, the Vatican fell into a silence that seemed almost surreal. For hours, the extraterrestrial threat had hung over their heads like a sword of Damocles, And now that the beings had left with the gold, the relief was palpable. But with the relief also came a deep sense of doubt. Had this been the right decision? Would they, in fact, have saved the planet? Or was the gold sacrifice merely a reprieve from a much worse fate? Giovanni Rossi, looking out over the now empty courtyard where the gold had once been, couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Although the Draconians were gone, the grim promise that they would return echoed in his mind. He knew this peace was fragile, a mere intermission before the next demand. The Vatican was safe, for now, but for how long? The insurgent cardinals, in turn, withdrew in silence. Defeated in both spirit and faith, Bellini, once so fervent and determined, now seemed a shadow of the man who had defied the Draconians themselves. His eyes, once full of conviction, were empty as he slowly walked out of the courtyard. He and the other insurgents knew the battle had been lost, but for them, the real defeat was a moral one. In his eyes, the Church had given in to corruption and fear. Inside the halls of the Vatican, Pope John XXIII isolated himself with his closest advisors. His face showed the weight of the decision he had made. Although the destruction had been avoided, he knew that the choice to hand over the gold would have lasting consequences, both inside and outside the Church. There was a sense that the very heart of the Vatican had been wounded, and now rumors of conspiracy and betrayal would begin to grow. But perhaps most disturbing was the warning left by the Draconians. "We will return." The gold had been delivered, yes, but that had only been a temporary transaction. So now the Vatican found itself in a vulnerable position. Knowing that the next encounter with the Draconians could be even more dangerous, they would return. And this time, humanity might not have anything valuable enough to trade. Giovanni, who had remained faithful to his duty to protect the Pope, felt that this battle was far from over. As the Vatican tried to recover from the turmoil of recent days, Giovanni Rossi could not shake the growing unrest within himself. He had been witness to something the world would never fully understand, something that transcended what any ordinary human being could conceive. The weight of the secret, kept for so long, seemed to increase with each passing day. Giovanni, always loyal to the Church and the Pope, began to realize that silence could be his greatest betrayal. He knew more than anyone about the true purpose of the Vatican gold, about the dark intentions of the Draconians, and about the deep fissures now tearing at the very soul of the Church. However, something inside him began to change. The silence that once seemed necessary to protect humanity now sounded like complicity in something greater, something evil. Without telling anyone, Giovanni began writing a detailed account of the events he had witnessed. He did not want to believe that the Vatican had become an accomplice of the Draconians, but the facts spoke for themselves. The Church had given up its greatest treasure, not in the name of faith or love for humanity, but out of fear, and most worrying of all, he knew that the Draconians would return, stronger, more demanding. This cycle of submission would not end with the delivery of the gold. Giovanni, in his heart, believed that the fate of humanity was in danger, and the Vatican's decisions had only delayed the inevitable. The words of his report flowed like a river of despair. He described in detail the arrival of the Draconians, the cruel ultimatum, the revolt of the insurgent cardinals, and the final sacrifice of the gold. The most shocking of all was his decision to include the revelations he discovered in the Vatican's secret archives, records of past encounters, ancient civilizations that had already gone through the same ordeal. Giovanni knew that this knowledge could no longer remain hidden. What he was writing was not just a chronicle of the last days, but a warning to the world. He knew that by making his revelation public, he could put his own life at risk, but the imminent danger approaching Earth was much greater. The Draconians were not just a threat to the Vatican. They were a threat to human existence itself. Giovanni felt like he was running out of time, and the world needed to know what was coming. The days after the departure of the Draconians brought a deceptive calm to the Vatican. To the outside world, everything seemed to be back to normal. But within the sacred walls, a shadow was growing. A sense of vulnerability hung in the air. And although the gold had been delivered, everyone knew that the price paid would not guarantee lasting peace. The Vatican would never be the same again, and Giovanni Rossi, in particular, knew this better than anyone. As Giovanni finished compiling his account, a series of unsettling events began to unfold. The lights that had previously sparkled in the sky during the Draconians' first visit reappeared, but now in greater numbers and with greater intensity. Each night the sky over Rome seemed to pulse with an alien energy. Fear began to spread among the guards and clergy who were aware of what this could mean. The Draconians were preparing to return, Giovanni, always attentive, began to observe movements within the Vatican more closely. Secret meetings between high-ranking cardinals and scientists outside the Church began to occur with alarming frequency. Science and faith, which had always been on opposite sides, now seemed to be working together in a desperate attempt to prepare the Vatican for the inevitable. Giovanni learned through his contacts that the Vatican had strengthened its defenses in ways that could never have been imagined. There was a climate of preparation for war, not a spiritual war, but a cosmic war. As the days went by, Giovanni noticed something even more worrying. The gold that had been handed over to the Draconians was being secretly replenished. The Church had silently begun to accumulate even more gold reserves, as if it knew that the first delivery was just the beginning. The Pope, although calm in his apparent leadership, was also aware that danger was imminent. Every meeting, every decision made in the secret chambers of the Vatican reflected the growing fear that the Draconians would soon make their next demand. Their return was no longer a distant possibility. It was an imminent certainty. Temporary peace had become a fragile illusion. Giovanni knew that the Draconians would return, and this time the gold would not be enough to satisfy them. As the days passed, Giovanni Rossi became increasingly aware that the Vatican was entering a phase of intense preparation, not just to resist the next coming of the Draconians, but to hide the truth from the world. The silence in the Vatican, which once conveyed a sense of power and mystery, now seemed to reflect fear and despair. While the world continued to ignore what was happening within the walls of Vatican City, something great was underway. Secret meetings between scientists and religious leaders continued to increase. Giovanni was able to hear fragments of these discussions where advanced technology was mentioned alongside ancient rituals and prayers. The Church, which had always fought to keep faith separate from science, now seemed to have no choice. The Pope knew that they could not rely solely on their beliefs to defend themselves. They were preparing something, a kind of contingency plan, a combination of faith and strength for what could be the greatest confrontation humanity has ever faced. The gold, which had been handed over to the Draconians, was being secretly replaced in even greater volumes. Giovanni discovered that the Church was hoarding gold from all its churches, monasteries, and properties around the world, as if preparing for a new demand from the aliens, but that was only part of the plan. Giovanni learned that, in addition to gold, they were developing weapons. Not the weapons we know, but something that involved both alien technology and ancient exorcism rituals. There was an emerging belief among the most powerful cardinals that the Draconians were not just extraterrestrial beings, but also demonic forces, something that defied comprehension. These hybrid weapons were being developed in secret, and Giovanni knew that when the Draconians returned, the Vatican would not just hand over more gold. This time, they would fight. But while this was happening, Giovanni also wondered if any weapon, no matter how advanced or blessed, could stop the devastating power he had witnessed. The Church was playing a dangerous game, and he feared that by trying to resist, they were only provoking an even greater catastrophe. Finally, after weeks of preparation, the signs that the Draconians' return was imminent became undeniable. The lights in the sky grew brighter and closer. The hums, which had previously been almost imperceptible, now echoed throughout Vatican City, filling the air with an invisible fear. Every man, every woman within those walls knew that time was running out. The calm that had followed the delivery of the gold was about to be broken. Giovanni Rossi, although distressed, knew he could no longer wait. His accounts were complete, and he knew the world needed to know the truth. The Vatican, which had always represented humanity's last spiritual stronghold, now hid secrets that could determine the fate of the entire Earth. The revelations that Giovanni intended to spread were not just about gold, the Draconians or Pope John XXIII. They were about the fragility of faith itself, about how humanity was at the mercy of forces far greater than anyone could imagine. That night, as Giovanni watched the sky once again, the lights he feared began to move in a more coordinated manner, as if a celestial army was positioning itself for the final attack. The atmosphere was heavy. The air felt electric. And then, just like before, the same blinding light filled the sky. The Draconians were back. But this time, they didn't just come to negotiate. There was a sense of inevitability, that the final confrontation was about to happen. Pope John XXIII, now weaker and older, was preparing to make a final sacrifice. But this time it wasn't just gold. The Church, in secret, was ready to fight, and Giovanni knew that the fragile peace that had been bought with gold had come to an end. The return of the Draconians was no longer a secret kept by the Vatican. Soon, the whole world would know. The truth, so long suppressed, was about to be revealed in a catastrophic way. And when the first bolt of light ripped through the sky again, Giovanni knew that the final battle for humanity had begun. Thus ends this phase of a story full of mysteries, conspiracies, and extraterrestrial threats that challenge faith and human survival itself. The Vatican, once an unshakable symbol of power and divinity, now struggles against forces beyond its understanding. But what will come next? How will humanity face the Draconians on their second visit? And was the sacrifice of gold enough to avoid total destruction? Or did it just postpone the inevitable? If you are intrigued and want to know more about this fascinating story and other suspense and horror stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave a like, comment on your theories, and follow the next parts of this saga full of mystery. Let's explore together the darkest secrets that the world and the universe hide.